Let's plan our ADA Title II compliance project for the new web accessibility rule using 4 phases. On the screen with me is a color-coded table, and the columns are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. And the rows are requirements and exceptions, roles and responsibilities, training, and planning. We're going to go through this table in each of the 4 phases to help you plan your project. So let's get started with phase 1, requirements and exceptions. The requirements here are WCAG 2.1 AA conformance for our web content, which includes our websites and documents, and then also our mobile apps. But we need to be aware of the 5 content exceptions. And so one note here is we're not going to cover all of the details in this video, but I have many resources that do cover the details, and I'm going to include those resources in the description. And one of those resources is going to be a guide on exactly what the exceptions for content are. But for now, just know that there are 5 content exceptions, and we need to plan around that because we don't want to work on any of the content that is accepted under this new rule. All right, so next in phase 1, we are going to appoint our roles. We are going to have different people that are working on this project. So at a minimum, we want 2 people on our accessibility committee. So we will at least have an accessibility coordinator, but then ideally we also have a tech lead and we have a content lead. There may also be a compliance officer. And of course, we are not limited to these different roles, but we are going to have these different roles, and then we are going to assign responsibilities. Again, I will provide resources to help you with creating these roles and knowing the different responsibilities. Also, we are going to start training on the web content accessibility guidelines immediately because this is going to help inform our project. Just think about it logically. How can we have this whole project that is based around WCAG 2.1 AA conformance and our project leaders don't know about WCAG 2.1 AA? That is, this training is going to inform the entire project, so we at least need to have the people that are working on our project. So the roles that we just set out, all of the people that are filling those roles are going to take training so that they can better implement this plan. They can better plan. They can coordinate. It will make everything so much easier. So we're going to have that training. I do offer a training course at WCAGcourse.com, and that course is going to have exactly what you need to know. But the point here in this box is that in phase 1, we are already training on the web content accessibility guidelines. And right now, it's not so much as we're concerned with making sure our content is accessible as it is making sure that we can execute our plan perfectly, or not perfectly, but as best we can. And then the next section under phase 1 is planning. So here is where we are going to start working on our inventory, our budget, our timeline, and how we are going to procure services, what services we are going to procure. And so we're going to start working on all of these different items. All right, so now we are going to move right into phase 2. So we are going to build on all of the work that we have been working on in phase 1, and we're going to start to flow into phase 2. So for requirements and exceptions, we're going to actually start working on our website, on our mobile app, on any active documents we have, and then potentially also content. So this may include audits, this may include remediation, this may include becoming we could be taking further inventory on all of the documents we have. Let's say we have thousands of documents, and so our original inventory was just like, we have this folder of documents, but we don't know all of the documents that are here. We can start working through and maybe archiving certain documents that we don't need, etc. But in phase 2, we are actually going to begin work, and here's where we are making progress towards WCAG 2.1 AA. Also, when it comes to the roles, our coordinator is going to work on documenting our efforts, documenting what we need. We're going to work on an accessibility policy. Our tech lead is going to be working with the service providers. And then our content lead is going to begin working on content remediation. It could be the organization of the content remediation, but either way, our content leader is going to be working towards the accessibility of the content. And when it comes to training, now we are going to expand the training beyond just the original roles. So beyond just the coordinator and the tech lead, now our entire digital team is going to take training on the web content accessibility guidelines. So this can include contractors, employees, other staff. Everyone who works on the digital content is now going to take training. And then on this last box I have for planning, we are going to create an accessibility policy. So this is in part what the accessibility coordinator was working on. They are going to at least have a basic accessibility policy that we can build upon in the next phase. But this accessibility policy is going to incorporate all of the information that we're working on in phase one. So we're going to look at that information. We're going to make sure that everything is still aligned with what we expect, and we're going to take that inventory, the digital inventory. We're going to take the budget, the timeline, the roles and responsibilities involved, and we are going to create an accessibility policy. And this accessibility policy is really going to organize our efforts, and it's going to be the centralized hub that we look to when determining what we need to do to move forward on this project and make sure that we meet our compliance deadlines. Remember, you only have 2 or 3 years, depending on your entity size or the population of your area for your public entity. So you only have 2 or 3 years for compliance. So we need to be moving on this compliance project plan in an expedited manner. So we need to move swiftly. I have an accessibility policy template, and I will include that template in the resources section for the description. All right, so now we are going to move on to phase 3. So we are continuing to progress, and we're going to move on from phase 2. We're going to flow on to phase 3. Of course, if we need to finish up anything, we will. But with phase 3, for requirements and exceptions, we're going to work on a second website, if there is a second website, any other independent web pages, any other documents besides the active documents that we need to work on. And when I say active documents, this would be the active documents that we're going to prioritize, but there may be other documents that are active but less used. And then so in phase 3, we're also going to work on our content. So content can include, it's going to include video, potentially any audio files that are available, any other images that we need to prioritize, and then potentially any text. So we're going to be working on all of those things, as well as, I've already mentioned documents. And then as far as roles and responsibilities, the coordinator here is now going to review progress that has taken place, make adjustments where necessary. Our developer is going to work on the development processes, and then the content editor is going to work on the content processes. So when I say processes, it involves how are we actually creating content? When we're editing code, are we doing so in an accessible manner? So making sure that our processes are resulting in accessible content and an accessible code, so that we are not in a disjointed process where we've done all this work, but then we are undoing that work as we are developing or as we are creating new content. All right, so to the training phase, now we are going to move on from just training the digital team to organization-wide training. And we need to do this because it's not just the digital team that is creating content. Yes, we are primarily concerned with the digital team, but keep in mind that everybody in the organization is producing documents. Everybody in the organization is producing content. Whether or not they're posting on social media, they are sending messages, and we need to make sure that accessibility is a priority throughout the organization, not just in one department, but throughout the organization. Because if it is not, then a culture where we don't prioritize accessibility will start to compete with the digital team that is prioritizing accessibility. Because think about it in terms of budget. If the leadership, if the directors, if whoever else is in charge of certain programs is not prioritizing accessibility, they're not going to factor it into the budget. They're not going to prioritize it during procurement, and it's going to lead to conflict. So everybody in the organization needs to be on the same page when it comes to accessibility. And so we need to make sure that we have organization-wide training. And then also when it comes to planning, now we are going to update our accessibility policy. And so this is where the accessibility coordinator is going to assess the progress, whether milestones are being met, whether deadlines are being met, and they're going to update the policy and reflect any changes that need to be made, any improvements that need to be made. And so here is the accessibility coordinator really overseeing the project. We're updating the centralized hub, and then hopefully we are ahead of time, because that's part of the idea here is we want to be in compliance well before the deadline. We don't want to wait to anywhere close to the deadline. So with that said, we continue on to phase 4. And when it comes to phase 4, when it comes to requirements and exceptions, here we are making sure that our social media now is producing accessible content. So everything that we're posting on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc., all of that content is now accessible and WCAG conformant. We also potentially have any document templates, so that when we do create documents, we use these already pre-made accessible templates. So all that has to happen is that the information that is populated, you also make sure that it's WCAG conformant. Moving on in phase 4 to roles and responsibilities, we need to ensure that we are in compliance. So now here the accessibility coordinator is reviewing everything to not only make sure that we're on track, but now make sure that we are in compliance with the ADA Title II requirements. The developer is reviewing the processes, refining the processes. The same with the content manager. They are also reviewing the processes to make sure that all social media content is accessible, all blog posts are accessible, any new images have appropriate alt text where appropriate, etc. So this is where we're going to go in and make sure all of our efforts are coming together, everything's working, and that everything is indeed WCAG 2.1 AA conformant that our team is working on. And then when it comes to training in phase 4, I have custom review training, because this is where we're going to review what is actually happening in our organization ahead of the compliance deadline, and making sure that we are on track for WCAG conformance for whatever digital assets are produced, for whatever documents are produced. And if there are any problems with accessibility, this is the time now to address them and make sure that everybody is flowing in the right direction. It's not that perfection is necessary, but we do need to make sure that everybody is on an excellent track, and everybody is on all of our efforts are on track to lead to WCAG 2.1 AA conformance ahead of the compliance deadline. So if there are any accessibility issues, any recurring problems, we're going to address them in the custom review training. And here is where you might want to have an independent party come in and really assess the organization-wide accessibility. Look through the documents, look at the websites, look through the processes. And here the accessibility coordinator could also do this. They could go in and look at everything that is happening. And now is the time for not only feedback, but training to correct any issues that are occurring. And then on the last block here, I have accessibility folder and documentation. So in phase 4, when it comes to planning, we are going to have an accessibility folder, and it's going to include all of the documentation of the efforts that we've made, the progress that we've made, what has been completed. If there is anything outstanding, we need to work on that. But here we want to make sure that we have documentation of the actual WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. So this can include a conformance statement from the provider of the accessibility of your website. It can include provider certification. It can include user testing. All of the efforts that you have made. Here is where you want to document those efforts and show that we have this plan. We've executed on this plan, and we're going to continue to maintain WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. So keep in mind, going forward, we're going to have a streamlined process where we are making sure our assets are WCAG 2.1 AA conformant. But and the work will come down, the cost will come way down, but we do need to make sure that we maintain accessibility throughout. So we don't have all of this effort only to fall apart once we've reached compliance. We want to make sure that we remain compliant with Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so for that reason, our accessibility coordinator is going to ensure that accessibility is maintained. And here we have a folder where we house the documentation that really just is evidence that the efforts have been made and the investment is still there. All right, so this gives you a really good outline of how you're going to move forward in different phases. Of course, this is going to vary based on the size of your public entity, but these phases give you a really good general feel for how you're going to move forward and be compliant with ADA, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act for this web accessibility update to the regulation. So I'm going to include many, many resources in the description. I highly recommend my WCAG course because this is going to have the training that you need to understand the WCAG 2.1 AA conformance requirement. So I will include links to all of these resources in the description, and make sure to there will also be a link to an ADA Title II resource center. This is going to help you with documentation, including an accessibility statement, an accessibility policy. It's also going to help you understand the content exceptions, the deadlines, etc. So I highly recommend you go to the resource center and familiarize yourself with these different resources.